Jeepers yipes, they're all coming out the pipes. It's Virtual Boy Works episode 6. Mario's second outing on Virtual Boy demonstrates once again Nintendo R&D 1's preference, or perhaps mandate, to steer clear of retreading the Super Mario Bros. Series. Of the 3 Mario-adjacent titles to hit the Virtual Boy in its short lifetime, 2 of them nuzzle right up against the Super Mario Bros. Concept without actually retreading it. The upcoming masterpiece Virtual Boy Wario Land is 2 degrees of separation removed from Super Mario Bros., having mutated out of the Super Mario Bros.-like Super Mario Land series for Game Boy. And Mario Clash goes the 2 degrees of separation in the other direction. It is, in effect, a variation of the original Mario Bros., the arcade hit that Super Mario Bros. Spun off of. Of course, this is Mario Clash rather than, say, Mario Bros. For Virtual Boy, because it has to drop the essential fraternal nature of the Brothers concept by the very nature of being a Virtual Boy title. This is, once again, a fundamentally single-player experience, an adventure strictly for Mario, with no place on this isolated platform for his poor, overlooked brother. As such, Mario Clash has to go a long way to make up for the loss of the addictive frenemy multiplayer design of Mario Bros., which was by far that game's greatest strength. I'm not sure that the effort is wholly successful, but it certainly does make for one of the most interesting and overlooked titles in the entire Mario canon. Like Mario Bros., Mario Clash takes the form of a single-screen action platformer in the classic vein of early 80s arcade games. It's more of a score challenge and time attack than Mario's more conventional titles, beginning with Donkey Kong, as you're not trying to reach a physical goal, but rather seeking to achieve some sort of fixed objective within a closed space. That objective here is, as in Mario Bros., to clear the area of various invasive critters. These range from classic Mario Bros. Monsters like fighter flies and sidesteppers to latter-day bestiary entries like boos and pokies. The play design here takes into account one critical change in the Mario canon that transpired between the 1983 debut of Mario Bros. And the 1995 launch of Mario Clash. The fact that Mario's greatest power is his ability to jump on and stomp foes. Back in the older game, Mario had to avoid direct physical contact with enemies until he had flipped them over by punching the floor beneath them. But that would seem weird in a game following on the heels of a decade of our hero squashing foes flat. That said, you can't really get much of anywhere in Mario Clash by trying to pound enemies from above. Nearly every monster you face off against is one that can't be defeated by jumping, be it an ambulatory cactus or a spiky beetle. So instead of smacking the ground beneath enemies, here Mario defeats them by tossing turtle shells at them. The only foes vulnerable to Mario's mighty shoes are Koopa Troopas, replacing the venerable shell creepers of Mario Bros., who are susceptible, as always, to a good, hard stompin'. Koopa Troopas in Mario Clash are kind of like Sith, always 2 there are. They're the only enemies you can stomp, and the only enemies you can throw. And if you chuck one off the stage, another Koopa will emerge from the pipes at the upper corners of the screen. That's because Koopas serve as the only real weapon you have against the other bad guys in Mario Clash. A finite number of monsters appear in each stage alongside the Koopa Troopas, and because you can't jump on those other guys, your only form of offense is to chuck turtle shells at them. You complete a stage once you remove all the non-Koopa enemies, which isn't nearly as easy as it sounds. In order to clear monsters, you have to attack them according to specific rules. The most basic pose, the single-spiked beetles that appear as the first monsters in the game, can be taken out pretty easily by throwing a turtle shell at them from any direction. Mini-monsters, however, can only be attacked by throwing a shell into or out of the screen. That's the gimmick here. Mario Clash lacks multiplayer, so it replaces Luigi with a third axis of gameplay. Mario can toss turtle shells laterally to the left and right, but most foes have to be attacked from the front or back. This central mechanic ties Mario Clash to another contemporary Mario spin-off, Yoshi's Island, where the final boss battle involved flinging eggs into the distance to smash a kaiju-sized Bowser. Here, however, it's a skill you have to make use of essentially beginning with the second stage. It's pretty tricky because there are no crosshairs to help you line up shots, and the foreground and background layers line up along a single point perspective vanishing point. You have to learn to see how the points in the 2 layers relate. Taking out enemies in the center of the screen is pretty intuitive, but the further along the edges you travel, the greater the drift between layers. The Z-axis element is obviously meant to show off the Virtual Boy's parallax effects, and the game does a bang-up job of creating the sensation of things flying into your face. That said, Mario Clash's depth mechanic doesn't really become any easier to parse if you're viewing the action in proper 3D, rather than simply looking at a single eye's image as in this video. As a result, this turns out to be an unusually challenging entry for the Mario series. Simply lining up your shell projectiles across layers takes some practice. Yet even once you have that down, Mario Clash is hard. The level designs here grow in complexity pretty quickly. The layout remains consistent across sets of roughly 4 stages, then each new set ups the complexity. Just about every stage contains a few constants, platforms in the foreground and background, typically high and low. Many stages have gaps in the upper floor, with mid-level platforms allowing Mario to quickly pass between elevations. However, the only way to travel between foreground and background walkways is to pass through the pipes that connect them. Note that enemies also use these pipes, making them dangerous to traverse carelessly. Some stages also require you to use pipes to shift between the upper and lower floors of a layer as well. The arrangement of pipes can vary wildly from level to level, and getting a handle on the shifting connections between the stage areas, while also being mindful of the location of enemies and the various techniques you need to employ to destroy them, turns out to be a lot to keep in your head at any given moment. Enemies each have different attributes and defensive abilities to keep players on their toes. The triple-spiked Spinies can only be stunned by hitting them across layers. Pokies can't be destroyed until you knock away their lower segments, and those cleared away segments can regenerate if you let a lone Pokey head wander around on its own for a few seconds. Meanwhile, boos become immaterial and impossible to strike. The rolling gun emplacements will fire projectiles at Mario if he stands in front of them, or on a platform directly across from them on the opposite layer. This makes defeating them especially tricky since their cannonballs can knock a Koopa shell out of the air. Enemies will right themselves after a few moments, just as in Mario Bros., so once you stun a foe you have to hurry over and kick it away. This can be exceptionally difficult given the convoluted pipe conduits that link layers. In some stages you'll have to scramble across multiple levels and layers in order to reach an enemy that you've knocked upside down. And amidst all of this, time is constantly ticking away. The dreaded fireball from Mario Bros. And Wrecking Crew returns here to hurry players along if they don't clear the stage with utmost efficiency. It's a nerve-wracking game that requires high-level play pretty much from the get-go. Really, Mario Clash is a bit like TELEROBOXER that way. It's a remarkably complicated game despite its seeming simplicity in an almost un-Nintendo kind of way. It doesn't help that Mario Clash bizarrely reverses the standard Mario button input scheme. Despite more than a decade of contrary precedent, B causes Mario to jump, and A serves as the attack button. You can also use the shoulder triggers to perform actions, but this doesn't help as much as you'd like. Honestly, Mario Clash would be considerably easier for Nintendo old-timers if it had simply retained the control setup that had been hardwired into our brains through this very franchise. It's an odd and seemingly spurious convolution in an already complex game. All of that said though, Mario Clash is a fun and interesting take on the Mario Bros. Arcade-style play setup. There's a lot to keep track of, but once you get a feel for the action, it starts to feel fairly second nature. There's a lot of satisfaction to be had in the way you can set up loops by flinging a Koopa shell across layers and catching it on the rebound, and by taking out multiple enemies at a time. This is a demanding game, reportedly containing 99 unique stages. I say reportedly because Mario Clash allows you to begin at any stage from 1 to 40, but anything beyond that you have to reach honestly through normal play, and there are no continues and no battery saves. I'm sure there are people who can reach stage 99 on original hardware rather than by exploiting emulator save states, but I am not one of them. Curiously, it seems there's no final showdown or boss battle in Mario Clash. There are bonus levels every once in a while, but even though the pre-game demo reel shows Wario setting the events of the game into motion by absconding to Clash Tower by airship, you never actually face off against him. Presumably, he was otherwise occupied by starring in Virtual Boy Wario Land. Warts and all, Mario Clash is one of the more notable releases for Virtual Boy, and not just for its lineage, though that's important too. This is a brisk, challenging, single-screen action game that demonstrates the strengths of the platform while largely, sidestepping its shortcomings. It's also proven to be arguably the most enduring Virtual Boy creation. Nintendo has been pretty aggressive about erasing Virtual Boy from history, what with it being the greatest blot on the company's video game track record. Despite the obvious appeal and logic of, say, republishing Virtual Boy classics on 3DS, that never happened. And so fascinating works like TELEROBOXER and Wario Land and Mario Clash have been lost to time. Mario Clash did get a brief moment of recollection in the WARIOWARE series, which built a microgame around it, complete with monochrome red visuals. so it returned for like 5 seconds. And even then, a big part of Mario Clash's history has been lost to the ether. Nintendo actually debuted Mario Clash as a bonus mode in a planned title called VB Mario Land, which would have been a proper Mario Land sequel for Virtual Boy. VB Mario Land does not appear to have been reworked into Virtual Boy Wario Land. What footage exists of the cancelled game looks and plays like a Mario title, not a Wario game. And it also included some Zelda-like top-down sequences that would resurface in the totally unrelated Super Mario 3D Land for 3DS. So while I said Nintendo R&D 1 didn't like to play in the classic Mario sandbox, it's not entirely true. The history of Mario Clash offers a tantalizing glimpse of an exception to that rule that almost certainly is lost to all but fragmentary recordings made 25 years ago. Still, it's worth holding out hope that Nintendo will eventually revisit some of Virtual Boy's more unique and worthwhile titles. There's a lot to like about Mario Clash, as there is with TELEROBOXER and Wario Land, and it would be a shame for these inventive little games to languish in the archives forever just because they happen to be tied to a flawed platform. Next time on Virtual Boy Works, the Shin Megami Tensei franchise makes its extremely unlikely American debut.